2021 was a pretty eventful year for wrestling, with AEW and WWE touring again in the summer, championships being won by deserving and hardworking athletes, promotions like AEW, Impact, and MLW growing stacked rosters from WWE's releases, but the less said about those the better. There were quite a few highlights from this past year, so let's look at the top 10 best wrestlers who stood out the most in 2021. So before I begin, I just want to throw a little disclaimer out there. I haven't watched nearly as much indie wrestling or like New Japan and Impact as I usually do. Hopefully I'll be watching more in 2022, so sorry if your favorites from those promotions are not on this list. So let's get started with number 10, Bianca Belair. Bianca Belair should be higher on this list, I feel, but her year can kind of be split up into two parts. In January, the EST won the Women's Royal Rumble from the number 3 spot, by the way, and decided to challenge SmackDown Women's Champ Sasha Banks at WrestleMania 37. The build-up to the actual match itself was kind of lacking, but their match together at WrestleMania 37 was great nonetheless. It was an emotional and historic main event when Bianca Belair beat Sasha Banks to become the SmackDown Women's Champion. Bianca would then go on to have great pay-per-view title defenses against Bayley, including a great Hell in a Cell match, and she also had good matches with Carmella. A solid first title run, but then SummerSlam came around. Becky Lynch made a surprise return and challenged Bianca on the spot for her title and then beat Bianca in like less than a minute. Her rematch for the title would end in a no contest at Extreme Rules, but then Bianca, Becky, and Sasha would have a great triple threat match at Crown Jewel. Bianca Belair hasn't been in the women's title picture since being drafted to Raw. Overall, a good year for the EST of WWE, but dodgy booking in the last half prevented it from being a truly great year. Number 9, CM Punk. If I was biased, CM Punk would probably be in the top 4 at least, but I'm trying to make this list as balanced and as fair as possible. And probably one of, if not the biggest wrestling moment in the past decade, CM Punk returned to wrestling after 7 years since walking out of WWE. But it wasn't WWE where he returned to, it was All Elite Wrestling. That was back in August, and it still doesn't feel real seeing the best in the world back in wrestling. His first match was at All Out, where he defeated Darby Allin in a pretty good match, proving that he still got it. Other than a great feud with Eddie Kingston, which led to an awesome fight at Full Gear, Punk hasn't done too much so far, mainly having great matches with talent on the lower end of the card like Matt Sydal, Lee Moriarty, and Powerhouse Hobbs, just to name a few, which I can't believe some people are upset about, by the way. Most recently, he's been having a great feud with MJF on the mic alone, and he's hoping to build up his win-loss record to hold some AEW gold around his waist in 2022. Number 8, Big E. I'm making this list shortly after the Day 1 event, and oh boy do I feel bad for Big E. He had a pretty good 2021 as he entered the year as Intercontinental Champion. He lost it to a newly heel Apollo Crews at WrestleMania in an alright feud, but his big moment would come when he won the Money in the Bank ladder match in the summer. He had a fun little feud with Baron Corbin after he got his Money in the Bank briefcase stolen, but in September, Big E would cash in on Bobby Lashley to win a very much deserved first WWE World title. Looking back, he had a pretty underwhelming run, with only a couple defenses against Bobby Lashley and Drew McIntyre. They were still pretty good matches nonetheless. He would then main event Survivor Series in a big champion versus champion match against Roman Reigns, which he lost as well, but still put in a great showing. I originally had Big E at number 7, but just looking back, I feel really bad for him and his short title run. Hopefully he gets another chance to reign as world champ in 2022. Number 7, Edge. The Rated R Superstar would return from a 9-year-long retirement where he thought he would never wrestle again in the Royal Rumble in 2020. He had a couple long, hard-hitting matches with Randy Orton before being out for 8 or so months with the torn tricep. He would return again at the Royal Rumble in January 2021 and win the damn thing for a second time in his career, but this time from the number 1 spot. Third man ever to do so. Edge turned it up to 11 this year, as he would have great matches all year round. He would challenge Roman Reigns for the Universal title at WrestleMania 37, but then it got turned into a triple threat due to Daniel Bryan being involved. But that triple threat at WrestleMania is a contender for match of the year for sure. Although he was unsuccessful, he would return later in the year and have another great title match with Roman Reigns at Money in the Bank, which he lost again, but this time due to a pesky little Seth Rollins, and that kicked off the Edge and Seth Rollins feud, and all their matches were great, from SummerSlam to Madison Square Garden SmackDown to a banger of a Hell in a Cell match at Crown Jewel. Edge then cooled it down a bit and started a little feud with The Miz, and they just had a pretty entertaining match at Day 1. Number 6, Hangman Adam Page. It's been an interesting year for Hangman, as he started off the year by hanging with his buddies from the Dark Order, then having a couple mid-card feuds with Matt Hardy and Team Taz. He had an awesome match with Brian Cage at Double or Nothing, but that first half of the year was all just to get his confidence back after a loss to Kenny Omega at Full Gear in 2020. After he took some time off to be there with his wife after they had their firstborn, Hangman returned to win an epic casino ladder match to set up a match with Kenny Omega for the title at Full Gear 2021. A match 1 year in the making, Hangman Page defeated Kenny Omega to win the AEW World Championship. A great moment for a guy who's been working his ass off the past several years. Hangman's first title defense was against AEW newcomer Bryan Danielson, and they had an epic 1 hour time limit draw, and are set to have a rematch at the first Dynamite on TBS. His reign just started, but with the year he's had, I'm sure 2022 will be a big year for the Hangman. Number 5, Britt Baker, DMD. Britt Baker started off the year pretty busy by having a hard-hitting match with Thunder Rosa, and she also competed in an AEW Women's Title Eliminator Tournament. She had another match with Thunder Rosa, but this time in a lights-out match where the two women absolutely beat the hell out of one another. And even though Baker lost, a lot more respect was put on her name. It was one of, if not the best women's match of the year, and then Baker would go on to beat Hikaru Shida for the AEW Women's Title at Double or Nothing. Britt didn't wrestle all too much since she was dealing with the wrist injury, but cut good promos and defended her title against Nyla Rose and also Red Velvet. And one of, in my opinion, the more underrated women's matches of the year, Britt Baker retained against Chris Statlander at All Out. And then AEW Dynamite Grand Slam rolled around and she beat AEW newcomer Ruby Soho to retain her title again. In an example of Britt Baker proving she can go no matter what the environment, she beat the terrifying Abaddon in a street fight at the Halloween edition of Rampage. Then she also gave Ty Conti one of her best matches when she defeated her in a tough match at Full Gear. Britt Baker, along with a few other women's division stars, have been breathing new life into AEW's women's division. Number 4, MJF. 2020 was a pretty big breakout year for Maxwell Jacob Friedman, but he kept knocking it out of the park in 2021. He started the year off as being part of Chris Jericho's Inner Circle faction, and then he partnered with Chris in a losing effort against the Young Bucks for the AEW tag titles at Revolution, and then he broke off from the Inner Circle, forming his own faction named the Pinnacle. The Pinnacle and the Inner Circle would have some great matches like the Blood and Guts match, even if the ending was shot poorly, I didn't really mind. And also the Stadium Stampede at Double or Nothing. He won a fantastic Dynamite main event match against Sammy Guevara, and had a pretty lengthy but still interesting feud with Chris Jericho. He also had a brilliant match against Darby Allin at Full Gear. Then to end the year off, he started an epic feud with CM Punk whilst winning the Dynamite Diamond Ring for the 3rd year in a row. MJF is probably the number 1 guy on the microphone for this year as well, cause man, can that guy cut a promo. Number 3, Roman Reigns. The Tribal Chief Roman Reigns won the Universal title in the summer of 2020 and is still holding it to this very day. He started off the year by having an all-out brawl with Kevin Owens at the Royal Rumble in a last man standing match. Roman has been the head of the table of not just SmackDown, but basically the whole WWE, as Roman is without a doubt one of the main reasons to tune into WWE right now. He smashed and stacked Danielson and Edge to walk out of WrestleMania 37 with his Universal title, like I mentioned previously. He also had great title defenses against Cesaro and Rey Mysterio throughout the summer. And then, like I mentioned earlier as well, a great match with Edge at Money in the Bank. And then we saw surprise returns from John Cena and Brock Lesnar, which Roman Reigns would have great feuds with both of those guys. Roman's title defense against the Demon Finn Balor at Extreme Rules, while good throughout the match itself, the ending was just god-awful. But Roman's been in main event mode throughout all of 2021. Number 2, Bryan Danielson. This has been one of the best years of his career. Daniel Bryan was in the Universal title picture from Elimination Chamber to a couple weeks after WrestleMania 37. He would lose to Roman Reigns at Elimination Chamber and Fastlane, but in both cases shenanigans were involved. Then, along with Edge, he lost to Roman in the main event of WrestleMania 37. A couple weeks after the loss, Bryan would lose again to Roman Reigns, thus forcing him to leave SmackDown. Bryan didn't re-sign with WWE and went quiet for a few months. Then at one of the biggest moments of the year, he signed with AEW and made a shock appearance at the end of All Out. Since becoming the American Dragon Bryan Danielson once again, he's had nothing but banger matches with the likes of Kenny Omega, Nick Jackson, Eddie Kingston, Miro, and so on, before facing against Hangman Page for the AEW title. Bryan Danielson has not disappointed one bit since arriving in AEW. Number 1, Kenny Omega. Kenny Omega has been the best wrestler for the past couple of years now. Whatever project he's working on, or whatever feud he's in, Kenny Omega always seems to be the talk of the wrestling town. The Best Bout Machine had many great matches, and he continued to do so in 2021. In his first AEW title defense, he pinned Rey Fenix in an amazing singles match at AEW's New Year's Smash. And then when the forbidden door was opened, Kenny got the team with the Good Brothers and even Kenta. With a huge ego boost, Kenny Omega, along with Don Callis and the Super Elite, had a dominant 2021, holding the AEW, AAA, and Impact Wrestling World titles around his waist. Kenny would have a wacky title defense against Jon Moxley at Revolution in an exploding barbed wire death match. While the ending was kind of a botch, I didn't really care too much. It was still just a crazy match with wacky violence. His next pay-per-view bout was at Double or Nothing, and he had an amazing triple threat match against Pac and Orange Cassidy. On an episode of Dynamite, he defended the title successfully against Jungle Boy, and what a match it was, making Jungle Boy a star and his future is looking brighter than ever. Before his rivalry with Hangman Page would kick back up, Christian Cage emerged as #1 ranked contender for Kenny's AEW title, and the belt collector gimmick looked to be nearing its end when Christian beat him for the Impact World title at the first Rampage, but at All Out, Omega proved he was still on top of AEW by retaining his AEW title. Kenny then had one of the best matches of the year in an epic time limit draw against the debuting Bryan Danielson, and then Omega would finally lose the AEW title to Hangman Adam Page at Full Gear. Kenny has been out of action since. It was revealed that Omega had been working with several injuries throughout the past year or two. I could have put either Omega, Roman, or Danielson in the top 3. They've each had such a really good year in 2021. But in Roman's case, the past couple months have felt a little stale, even though Roman is still amazing, and Danielson just started getting going again in AEW, and he'll definitely be at the top in 2022. Kenny Omega just overall seems like he's got it down. The matches, the whole belt collector thing, doing stuff that's different and getting viewers invested. So I would say Kenny Omega is the best overall wrestler of 2021. Thank you for checking out this video. Do you disagree with my top 10? I'm sure you do. Be sure to let me know in the comments. And be sure while you're down there to give this video a like and maybe even subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.